Now that we've got a hooked audience for you, I'd like to introduce Nguyen. I consider her a friend, but that's mostly because she remembers my name. So take it away. Oh,
thank you. Okay.
And I'll just switch you.
Test. No. Oh, test. All right. I probably don't even need this sometimes, but hi everyone. I'm really excited to be here. So while Brandon gets my slides up together, how many of you have any experience running sprints? By show of hands. Oh wow! So why are you guys here? You guys should be teaching this. So, but that's exciting. So we have an advanced audience. I'm gonna go through sort of the basics of the sprint for those of you who may not have ever done a sprint or experienced a sprint. But I can also save a bunch of time at the end for like more advanced topics, which I don't have slides on. But like, how do you run a remote sprint, or how do you run a one-day sprint? I've kind of done it all. So we can also spend some time on that at the end. Let me just share a little bit of background with you so that you know who's here today. So this is me and my background. So I have had a 16-year career as a product leader at early stage startups. I started after business school. I started my early career in 2000 at an early company called eBay. So when I joined eBay back in the day, there was only me and 5 other product managers. I was the PM of all of the buy it now features on eBay, eBay stores. I worked on the PayPal integration. I worked on all of checkout. So it was a really exciting time to be there. Saw it through hypergrowth. Was there for 5 years. One of the things I learned about myself early in my career was that I love the early stage. So after about 3.5 years of eBay, I was starting to feel like it was a bit big, and I really wanted to go back and just do it all again. I joined an early stage Series A startup called Oodle, which was Greylock backed. And back in the day, you could actually raise a Series A on just a PowerPoint deck, and certainly the world has changed since then. But I ran product and design function there, and then I had some stints at Betfair, Stella & Dot, Keaton Rowe. I've sort of seen the experience of hyper growth at a couple of these companies, and then companies that sort of didn't really make it. And after sort of 16 years as a product leader, I decided, I wanted to do something a little bit different. I had spent a lot of time, and I had the opportunity to join my old boss from my eBay days, who had just joined Omidyar Network. And Omidyar Network is Pierre Omidyar, who is the founder of eBay. It's a global investment firm. If it was a fund, it would be a $1.2 billion fund. They do venture capital and they do grants, and they invest in mission-driven companies. And so throughout my career, I've always been very attracted to mission-driven companies and companies that can get to scale. So I was there for 2.5 years, and then just recently, the team that I was part of at Omidyar Network spun out of Omidyar Network, and we formed our own venture firm, still investing Pierre Omidyar's money, so we're still a single LP. We're Spiro Ventures. Spiro is Latin for hope. We invest in late-stage seed and Series A companies, and we also are investing in just companies that can get to venture scale, so we only do for-profit investments, but also companies that at scale will have great impact on the world. So our tagline is founders who are looking to build a future for everyone, and those are the founders that we get really excited talking to. In the last 2.5 years, I've gotten a chance to work with a large number of startups, and one of the things I do is I coach our startup CEOs, I coach our startup founders and product leaders on product. But one of the things I quickly realized is I'm coming in and they're expecting me to be the expert, but I'm not an expert in their business at all. I don't know their products, I don't know their markets, I don't know their customers, I don't know the data. So I would feel very inauthentic giving them any type of advice. And so one of the things that I started to do was run design sprints for a portfolio. I'd been doing design sprints as an early stage product and design leader, and I said, hey, let me try out sprints with our portfolio. And I've run almost 24 sprints now, and I haven't yet had a bad sprint. So I'm really excited to teach the sprint process with you, and then you'll see that there's a lot of things on the table. Hopefully we'll get a chance to do some fun design sprint exercises to really just bring it home. Okay, so why do we sprint in the first place? Would love to hear from you guys. Why do you think we sprint? Any ideas? Faster feedback cycles, absolutely. Anything else?
Prototype to learn.
Good.
Solve a really hard problem quickly and collaboratively.
Solve a really hard problem quickly and collaboratively, absolutely. Yeah.
Continuously bring value to market.
Bring value to market, so fast iteration cycles so that we're delivering real value to our customers. Perfect. Anything else? I heard something here. Okay. Oh, that's great. Yeah. So actually, whenever I was an eBay PM, like we were very waterfall back in the day. So it was we had an idea. Maybe it came out down from an executive. Maybe it just came from the PM, and we would write the requirements and we'd hand it off to the designers, and then the engineers would build it. And certainly things have changed a lot since then. Everybody's lean and agile, but I think an important thing that I've had to relearn as a product leader is that it's so important. Like the best ideas come from other people, from your engineers, from your designers, and it's really important to bring everybody together to problem solve together. What else? Anything else? Okay, so all of the above is true, and I actually have a slide at the end sort of summarizing the benefits of the design sprint, and I think you covered the bulk of the points, but the most important point here of this slide is, especially at an early stage startup, time is your enemy, right? So you might only have 6, 12, 18 months of cash on hand, assuming that you raised some early stage seed funding, and you don't have time to test out all of your ideas, right? You don't have time to build them all, because if you end up building 4 or 5 of your ideas and you only have 2 months of runway left and none of those ideas work, then you're out of luck and you might not make it. These days, and I think we all know this from all of the agile stuff that we've learned, is that the slowest way to learn is to build all of your ideas and ship them out. So there's faster, cheaper ways of learning. And the design sprint is a product discovery process that's centered around design thinking, strategy, and sort of the best of product management to really bring a group together and then come up with ideas fast, and we prototype them, and then we test it with customers before we even send anything off to engineering. So we want to have a high degree of confidence that this is the right solution, it's going to work with our customers before we build it. So the goal is to increase cycles of learning. And then just sort of another sort of slide to emphasize this point, right? So Tom Chi, one of the founders of Google X, sorry? Oh, okay, so says that by the time you have, this is sort of the math of product discovery, right? So even if we're all amazing product managers, even the best product managers, even Steve Jobs, like any of his ideas really only has like a 5% chance of success, right? So assuming 5% chance of success for any of your ideas, if you try 20 things, that chances of you making it goes up to 64%, and of course, try out more ideas, the chances increase. But there's still a chance of failure, and so what you want to do is try out more ideas faster without having to build everything. So here's the design sprint. So rather than, again, coming up with the idea, building it, launching it, and learning, there's faster and cheaper ways of us validating our ideas with users. So the sprint gives us a shortcut to learning and building without having to launch anything. And the sprint stages that we follow, and I think half the room raised their hands saying that they have some experience with sprints. So this is very much, what I've followed is very much Google Ventures design sprint process, and they've written a book about it, they've written a lot of blog posts, but on day 1, we bring a cross-functional team together, and we sort of do a lot of mapping, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Then on day 2, we sketch, day 3, we decide, day 4, we prototype, and then day 5, we test. Okay, so I'm going to just walk through each of those one by one by sharing an actual case study of one of the product teams that I ran a design sprint for. So a little bit of context. So Geekie is a ed tech company based in Brazil, and they built an adaptive learning product for high school students to help them study for the national exam. One of the things that you need to know about Brazil is that the public universities are awesome and they're free. However, you have to score in the top quartile of the national exam in order to get into the free, awesome public university. But what happens is that it advantages people who have the financial means to afford test prep or private tutors, and it disadvantages the lower income population of Brazil. So Geekie, whose mission was to democratize access to higher education for Brazilian high school students, had built this adaptive learning platform. But they did, they built it and they assumed that people would use it. And of course, didn't quite happen that, so it didn't quite happen that way. And so what they found was that even after a couple of years being in market, they had really low adoption, and they had a freemium product, so they had low conversion from free to paid. And then they also just disagreed in terms of sort of what was the best path forward. And furthermore, they just had a PM quit on them. And so a brand new PM came in and all the engineers and the designers were like, what should we be building? And PM was like, I don't know, I just got here. So then they called me up. It was the perfect time to sprint. I flew down to Brazil and I ran a sprint with them. So let me take you through the sprint process. So the first step is the pre-sprint prep. Here were the Geekie challenges. So, when is a good time to sprint? Let me ask the group, like, any ideas in terms of like when you would want to sprint? Or ideas?
Very, very early, before you even know anything. when you have lots of questions.
When you have lots of questions, right? You don't know what to build. Great time to sprint. Any other ideas in terms of when you might want to sprint?
Like this one.
Pivot.
Yeah, lack of alignment when you're pivoting. Other reasons to sprint is when you want to sort of bring people together and agree on something, and you want to move fast, and you want to come up with lots of ideas in a short period of time. Other ideas?
When you're unsure whether you have product market fit.
When you're unsure, yeah. So you've been struggling like Geekie did for a couple of years, right? Like with what they thought was a great product, but nobody was using it. So clearly they didn't have product market fit.
When you have far more unknowns than knowns.
A lot of assumptions that you need to validate, absolutely. Okay. So yeah, those are all the right times to sprint, and Geekie certainly had many of those challenges. Okay. So the first step is really identify the facilitator. So in this case, it was me. Who to look for in a facilitator? So somebody who is very comfortable with the process itself, can keep the group on time, can keep the group organized, can synthesize the discussions. Sometimes that might be internally, so it might actually be you being in this room today, or you might even want to hire an external design sprint facilitator, at least for the first time, which is what I highly recommend, somebody who's actually done it and can facilitate the process. I have design sprint people. If any of you are interested in running this at your organizations, and you're not comfortable yet in running the design sprint on your own, I can recommend some design sprint facilitators for you. But first, you want to identify the facilitator. The next thing to do is to recruit the sprint team. So the ideal number is 6 to 8 people for the design sprint. I've run design sprints with 10 and 12 people before. It can work. It just slows the process down a little bit because you are now a lot more people coming up with ideas. And I wouldn't recommend a sprint for less than 4 people, but 6 to 8 is ideal. And then here are sort of some ideas of who you might want to invite to the sprint, right? The product manager, the designer, the engineer, the CEO or business owner or a business champion. You might want to invite somebody from the marketing team. You might want to invite somebody from the customer success team or somebody who can represent the customer. And really, the idea is let's bring together a cross-functional team, those who might have input into the solution, so they understand different elements of the business and have input into the solution, and that you want to get buy-in from. So those are the folks that I would recommend. The other thing that you need to do is that you need to identify who the decision maker is. And that's really important because during different parts of the sprint, we may have 2 or 3 really good but competing ideas, and you do really want to have somebody who can make the final call and say, okay, lots of good ideas out of here, but this is the one that I want to move forward with. So it's important to identify the decision maker. Question?
So you say to invite the CEO, but if you do so, will he dominate the conversation, try to shift the direction of the design sprint?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the question, for those who didn't hear it, is if you invite the CEO, will they dominate the sprint? And the answer is no. I've never had a CEO dominate the sprint because of the process that we run. So in the process, it's a very democratic process, and you'll experience it yourself, where everybody ideates, and everybody sketches, and everybody's ideas are sort of hung up on the wall, and people get to sort of vote on the ideas that resonate with them most, and then we spend the discussion around the ideas that have all the heat. So it's actually very humbling for a CEO, because all of these sketches are anonymous, to see that maybe their ideas weren't the ones that actually were the highest voted. The process itself lends itself such that no one person can dominate the conversation. So I've run over a dozen, almost 2 dozen sprints, have yet to have a CEO dominate the conversation, but good question. Another question.
Can you bring a real customer in place of the customer?
Yeah, the question is, can you bring a real customer to participate in the sprint? And the answer is yes, especially if you're B2B or enterprise. Like, I love having a customer participate in the sprint. So it's basically customer co-creation is what we call it, and it's awesome. Sometimes, what you want to make sure is that the customer is representative of other customers, and that they can actually spend the time doing the sprint, which is often hard. The other alternative is bring the customer into the first part of the sprint, which is the knowledge sharing, which is in the next slide, the knowledge sharing morning, so that they can share their needs, their pain points. You can ask them questions, and then bring them in at the very end of the sprint, where we have the solution of the prototype, where they can give you feedback. But I do like bringing in customers. Okay, so we want to gather sprint supplies, so you'll see a bunch of these supplies in front of you, but it will consist of Sharpies, paper, voting dots. We will have Post-it notes. We'll have a timer so that we can keep track of time. And I think there's a flip chart paper. So we'll have a bunch of design sprint materials that can easily be found in anybody's office supply closet. Okay, so once we've identified the cross-functional sprint team members, we have found the facilitator, we've gathered the sprint supplies, we've also booked the conference room, and we've booked everybody's calendars for somewhere between, like, all 5 days if you're running the whole sprint. I've also done sprints in 1 or 2 days, but we've booked people's calendars. It's now day 1 of the sprint, and we're about to kick it off. So what happens? So the facilitator will kick off the sprint. So a lot of times when people come, they have a vague notion of what might happen in the sprint, but it's very helpful for somebody to just start the morning by sort of framing, here's what we're going to be doing during the next few days together, and it gets people sort of eased into it. After we sort of kick off the sprint, we'll do what's called interview the experts. So we might have the CEO or the business owner come in and share business goals, business challenges, priorities, outcomes that they'd like to see, success metrics. You might have somebody who represents the customer talk about, like, the customer needs, the customer pain points. You might have an analyst sharing funnel numbers or the data. So you'll want different experts to sort of represent sort of their knowledge about something that will help us come up with the right solution. And it's not a one-way presentation, during this part of the discussion, we're really interviewing the experts. So it's really a Q&A time of, like, us trying to get everything that's in their head out, so that we all build collective knowledge of the situation. During this knowledge sharing morning, we also will take notes. And the notes will be in the form of how might we. So we'll have that stack of Post-its in front of us, and anytime we hear something really interesting, instead of just writing it down, we'll write it in the form of a how might we question. So one of the things that we might have learned in the knowledge sharing morning is that the reason why students aren't using the Geekie product is that they don't really trust that it's gonna do the job. And so we might write down, how might we gain students' trust? And the reason we form it into how might we question is because then it starts to open up the world of possibilities, all of the different ideas. Like when you write it in the form of like, how might we build students' trust, all of a sudden you have like 3 or 5 different ideas. So we wanna frame all of these all of these challenges into opportunities. So after the knowledge sharing morning, we'll gather all of the Post-it notes, we'll put them up on the board, and then we'll probably have like 1 or 2 people organize all of the Post-it notes, so rearrange them into sort of buckets or themes, and then we'll sort of write the larger bucket or theme up there, and then everybody will sort of gather around and read all of the how might we notes. Okay, so after that, yeah, question?
When you do the how might we notes, do you run the risk of solution during these sessions, or is that okay if you do?
Sometimes the how might we's are asked, like have a solution in it, but that's not our design challenge statement yet. What we're doing is we're gathering notes. Everybody reads them, but we haven't formed our design challenge statement yet. It's more important when we do form our design challenge statement, which I'll get to in the next slide, I believe, to not have the solutions presented in it. Good question. Okay, so in the afternoon, yeah, another question.
Is there an assumption here that there's a problem discovery process going on, that you don't have any stated problem that you've called the sprint for already?
Yeah, so okay, so the question is, does that just assume then that like the cross-functional team members that have come, to sprint with us have no idea what they're sprinting about? So generally, they have a vague notion of like what the problem is, but it hasn't been articulated in a way yet where we can then work towards solutions. So in Geekie's example, there was sort of this vague notion that they had this adaptive learning product, it wasn't working, they wanted to improve it. Yeah, and so it was a meaty and hairy enough challenge, but yet like they haven't yet articulated the design challenge yet. Okay, good questions. Okay, so next in the afternoon, we'll map a customer journey. And so the way to map a customer journey, and everybody should do this exercise irrespective of whether you're sprinting with your teams, which is, who are the users of our solution, and what is the end state? So map out those 2 things first. Who are the users, and what is the end state, or the desired end state that the customer wants to achieve? And then once you map out the users, the desired end state, then you can work to fill everything in, right? Which is, how are users journeying through their current experience to get to that end state? And so this is sort of the map that we created for Geekie. The reason why we do this is because in a sprint, we can't cover the whole experience, but we can identify where in this experience we're seeing the most challenges, right? Like maybe the most drop-off or the most challenges. And so we say, okay, this is where in the map we want to sort of focus the design challenge statement on. So it's really important to sort of map out the journey and come to an agreement around where in the journey we want to focus. Okay, and then after that, it's time to come up with the design challenge statement. So a couple things to note. So it starts with how might we, but number 1, you have to identify who the target user is, that we're designing for. And number 2, you want to identify what is their need or pain point that we're trying to solve for them. Now, while that sounds pretty intuitive, I guarantee you, of all the sprints I run, almost no teams get this right in the beginning, because when I ask them to come up with a design challenge statement, it always ends up being, well, how might we increase customer engagement, or how might we turn more customers from free to paid? And the problem inherent in that question is, that's what we want, but that's not necessarily solving any problem or pain point for the customer. So no wonder they're not doing what we want, because we haven't yet really identified what their true need is. Right, so we always want to write the challenge statement where there's a target user in mind and sort of what their goal, pain point, and state is. In this case, with Geekie, after a few iterations, we wrote it as, how might we help students engage with their study plans to best prepare them for the national exam? Okay? So with that, now comes the fun part. And we're gonna start getting you involved in a second. So step 3 is ideating and deciding. Okay, so how many of you have ever watched a Pixar animated film? Hopefully everybody? Okay, so just like the animated film illustrators, they don't just write the film or the cartoon right away. They go through a very similar process that we'll go through during our design sprint, which is 1, they'll gather together, they'll take notes. 2, they'll then start doing a mind map and sort of doodling some ideas. 3, they'll start sketching, and 4, they'll stitch together their sketches. So we'll go through a very similar process. So one of the artifacts of the sprint is the Crazy 8. And this is what we're going to do together as the first group exercise. But to explain what Crazy 8s are, we take a piece of paper, we fold it in half, and then in half again, and then half again. So after 3 folds, we'll have 8 different squares or frames. And then, if you rewind back to the design sprint challenge statement, we're going to each sketch 1 idea per frame of different ideas or solutions that we have that we think might best solve the design challenge statement. And we time box it somewhere between 5 and 8 minutes. And so by the end of the 5 or 8 minutes, you're going to have 8 different ideas that you put together, and that's why we call it Crazy 8s. Now, of course, if it's a sprint team of 6 to 8 people, by the end of a 5-minute process, you might have upwards of 50 different ideas. And so what we do to narrow down the ideas is that we'll hang each of these Crazy 8s up on the wall, and we'll do what we call an art gallery walkthrough, where we'll independently go around the room, read each of the Crazy 8 ideas, have a set of voting dots, which you see it on your table, and then we will put a vote or a dot on some of the best ideas. So by the end of this gallery walkthrough, you'll see which ideas have the most heat. So in this example, you can see that a lot of folks sort of voted on this idea, and that's all we would end up talking about during the discussion part, which is, let's not spend any time talking about ideas that didn't get any votes. Let's really focus the discussion on the ideas that have the most heat. And I will tell you that I always now run my group brainstorming exercises this way. I do not do your classic whiteboard, people shout out ideas, you're writing, and then other people feel compelled to critique it. It's just inefficient. In this way, you're getting out, again, in 5 or 8 minutes, up north of 50 ideas, and then in a very short period of time, you're able to sort of hone in on the best ideas and just focus the conversation on that. Okay, so enough of me talking. I'm going to move to the first group exercise. So what we're each going to do is we're going to take the sheets of paper in front of us, and if you don't have one,
Can you raise your hand?
yeah, so over here, Shelby. So Shelby and Angela, who are gracious volunteers, will hand out pieces of paper. You're going to fold the piece of paper into 8 squares. That means 3 folds. And hopefully, and for this exercise, you'll need the piece of paper, you'll need the Sharpie, and then a set of voting dots, which are on the table in the middle. Yeah, we need some Sharpies here. Okay.
For anyone who has personal pens, that would be helpful.
Yeah, so we might have to work with pens. By the way, so if there's not enough Sharpies, we can work with pens, but I highly recommend that when you do the sprint on your own, you always use Sharpies. So the reason why we use Sharpies is the following. One is that it keeps the fidelity at a high enough level, because when people have pens, they start trying to fill in all of the details. And at this point, it's not about how the solution works, it's what is the solution. So you want to just keep the fidelity at a high enough level, and then 2, with Sharpies, it's easier for people to sort of see and read as they walk around the room and look at the art gallery sketches. So, how do I rewind?
One below,
rewind.
one below, bottom
Okay.
below.
Below? Oh,
Below the big button.
Okay, got it. Okay, so I'm going to sort of show you again the crazy eight, and you can see that all of the crazy eights we sketch, right? We sketch and then we label. So all of these have a sketch and a label, and sometimes people say to me, "Oh, I don't know how to sketch." Actually, everybody knows how to sketch. It's not that hard. It's a lot of boxes and arrows, and so everybody knows how to sketch. So don't be afraid of sketching. So you want to sketch, and you want to then label your sketch. And by the end of the 5-minute exercise, I'm going to each give you 5 minutes, you're going to have 8 different ideas to the challenge statement that I'm going to put up. Okay, so the challenge statement is something that's near and dear to my heart. How might we build more diverse and inclusive organizations to improve company outcomes? So we all know, the research all says that more diverse organizations help to attract and retain great talent, helps teams become more creative and productive, and actually increases company outcomes. And yet, we haven't solved this yet. So we're going to all come up with, on your piece of paper, 8 different ideas on how we can build more diverse and inclusive organizations to improve company outcomes. So I'm going to time each of you. Any questions on the exercise before we start the timer? Make sense? Okay, we're going to get started. You guys have 5 minutes. And it's a silent sketch, by the way. So question over here. That's time. Okay, so what we're going to do now is that we're organized perfectly into the right number of groups. So at your table, what we're going to do is that we're going to start, because we can't hang these beautiful sketches up, we're going to pass our crazy eights to the left, and we're going to do a silent read of each of the crazy eights. And then you'll have a set of voting dots, and hopefully these tables over here have voting dots. Take your voting dots, and anytime you come across an idea that really resonates with you, that you think really will help improve this, or is a great solution to this challenge statement, you're going to put a dot next to that idea, and then after you finish reading the crazy eights, we're going to then pass again to the left. So I'm going to give you guys roughly about 6 minutes or so to read in silence. So we're not going to explain the crazy eights to each other. We're going to just silently read each of our ideas, take voting dots, put votes on your favorite ideas. No constraint to the number of votes, by the way. So, okay.
Tell us what the colors mean.
Colors mean nothing. You can just take some voting dots and then just vote. Any questions? Yeah, question here. No restrictions on the number of dots. So just, and hopefully we have enough dots, but we have more voting dots too. But just if you see an idea that really resonates with you, just take a dot and put it by that frame. So going back here, right? So you guys can see that the idea is we want to see where the heat is, the collective heat, based on the votes. Okay, so I'll give you guys 6 minutes to do a silent read and pass.
So does the 6 minutes include the dots?
Yes. Yeah. So as you're reading, this is we're trying to simulate the art gallery walkthrough. But as you're reading, if it really, you're reading an idea, it's like, oh, that's it. Put a dot on it. If it doesn't resonate with you, just skip over that idea.
Let's get it now. 1 minute ago.
All right, that was time. Okay, so I'm curious. Right back. Okay, so I'm curious. I'd love to hear some of the ideas that got 4 more votes. So, right. Any ideas that got 4 more votes that you guys are willing to shout out over here?
belongs to the team.
Okay, so one of the ideas that got 4 votes is diversify the talent management team. Okay, idea here? Go ahead.
One is have lunch with people unlike you and send a photograph to HR and be recognized.
Okay, so one of the ideas was have lunch with people who aren't like you, and send a picture. I'll send a picture, I like it, okay. And what was the other one?
Have quarterly company events where people openly talk about their interests without fear.
Okay, so the second idea was have quarterly open events where people are very open with each other, sharing their fears and intents without any fear and bias. Okay.
Sounds like there were more words than drawing on that one.
Over here, what was it?
So an inclusion group where different people can openly share their feedback within the group.
Okay, an inclusion group where different people can share their feedback within that group.
A day like person from another background.
Ah, okay, spend a day in the life of a person from another background. Really interesting. Okay, over here.
We have one with schedule team visits across sites and remove names from resumes.
Okay, remove names from resumes and then schedule team visits across sites. Very interesting. Team visits across sites. Okay.
Organize programs with different cultural themes.
Organize programs with different cultural themes, and then one more.
Really interesting art here around hiring diverse recruiters, since recruiters are often the face of the company and they're first.
Yeah, I think that this group also covered that. So hiring diverse recruiters, so the recruiting team should reflect the diversity as well. Yep. Mentorship of underrepresented groups. Okay, perfect. So you can see in this exercise, right, like we generated a ton of different ideas and very, very quickly we narrowed down the best ideas. Now what would normally happen in the design sprint is that's where we would focus the discussion of like anything that might have gotten, say, 4 votes or more. And then we hear from different folks who voted on the idea, what resonated with them about the idea. And then only at the end do we reveal the author. And the author can then just chime in anything that might not have already been covered. And so to Steve's question of like, does the CEO dominate the conversation? No, because of this process. Oftentimes, CEO might get very humbled where like, none of his ideas got like enough votes, and so they weren't discussed in the first place. So, okay, so we're gonna move on to more of the design sprint. Okay, so after we do the crazy 8s, and again, love the crazy 8s, even outside of the design sprint context, if you're ever running a brainstorm, do a crazy 8 exercise. Okay, so after we come up and we hear, the ideas that got the most heat, we're gonna then move to a solution sketch, which is, now we've heard some really, really interesting ideas, but our ideas don't live in isolation, right? Like, a customer then experiences the solution, and there's a frame of like, first they go here, then they go there, and then they go here. So first this, then that, then that. So we're basically starting to sketch out the UI, if it's in an app, or like the experience that a user will go through in going through our solution. And so this is an example of a solution sketch where on the left we'll draw out the UI if it's an app, and on the right we'll sort of write down notes. So we generally will have like about 30 minutes for people to do the solution sketches. So, so the idea is we heard a bunch of different great ideas. Now we're gonna take one of those ideas, and each of us will take a different idea or whatever idea most resonated with us, and we'll draw out the solution sketch. Then we'll do the same exact process of art gallery style, walkthrough, voting dots, and we'll each walk through the different solution sketches and critique and ask questions about the different solution sketches. And then after that, we storyboard, right? So we have now seen a bunch of different ideas. We've actually fleshed them out in a slightly more granular level of detail. And then we'll also have seen sort of where the heat is of these solution sketches. And now we turn to the decision maker. We might also have the group vote on their favorite solution sketches. But we'll turn to the decision maker and say, hey, there's these 2 or 3 sort of top ideas. We see the highest number of votes, but they're kind of equal in weight. decision maker with all of the context you have around the business problem, the customer needs, the KPIs, or objectives. Which solution do you think we should move forward with? The decision maker will decide, and then what we'll do is then we'll take that solution and break up into groups, and then we'll storyboard that solution. So we'll go into even greater detail than just 3 frames, and just really detail out the full solution. In the case of Geekie, the solution or the storyboard that they came up with, they called Mario's Journey. So how many of you have ever played Nintendo Mario Kart? Probably everybody in this room. So as you know, in playing the game, Mario and Luigi are racing through the racetrack, and they're trying to get to the finish line, but along the way, they're collecting coins and super boosters, and then they see where they are in the leaderboard. So similarly, Geekie wanted to gamify their adaptive learning product to incorporate a lot of the same gamification elements. And so they called it Mario's Journey, and this is the actual storyboard that the group put together. So now that we've actually drawn out the chosen solution frame by frame, we are ready to move into the 4th step, which is validating our solution, making sure that this is the right solution that we should be working on. The way we do that is that we prototype. So we'll take, so we've already drawn out, go backwards. We've already drawn the whole storyboard out, right? And so the designer can easily, at this point, take that and turn it into a clickable prototype through InVision or Sketch. And then we'll take that prototype out to users. So on the 5th day, we'll have scheduled somewhere between 6 to 8 customer interviews. We will show them our prototype. First, and the way I like to conduct user tests is that we first spend the first 10 or 15 minutes getting them really comfortable with learning everything that we can about their world. And like, what solutions are they using today? So the Geekie team might have said, okay, well, how are you studying for the high school national exam today? Are you using tutors? Are you using pen and paper? Are you using test preps? Are you using some software? We'll learn about the solutions that they use. We'll learn about the pain points that they have with the current solutions. So we'll learn as much as we can, and then we'll share with them the prototype, but we will try to refrain from walking them through the prototype, right? So we really want to observe the struggle that they might have with the prototype. So even if they get stuck and they turn to you, we are going to not show them how to get through the prototype. We're going to just say, like, well, if I wasn't here, what would you do? And they'd probably like, I'd probably give up. Or if they really get stuck, they might say, well, what did you expect would have happened, right? And so you want to try to learn and observe where they're struggling through the prototype. And then at the very end, we ask them a series of questions. Yes, Steve?
When you do the prototyping, based on your experience, do you usually just focus on one prototype, or do you do 2 prototypes and show the user and do that A/B testing?
So generally in the design sprint process, we choose a solution that we take. So we don't often what's called rumble, which is like take 2 competing solutions. We really want to focus on one and validate if that's any good. If it ends up not being the right solution, we can always go back to the drawing board and go take the second solution out to market. But we really want to sort of choose one, and that's why it's important to have a decision maker to then choose the one. So at the end, we will ask the user a number of questions, and here's the things that we will want to learn. So first of all, do they even relate to this problem? Is this even a problem that they have? But more importantly, can they complete the task? So, and this is more observation, which is, were you able to observe them going through the prototype without any difficulty? Then you want to try to find out how valuable is the solution to your target user, right? So what you want to learn is, how much do they value it, and would they trade off something for it, right? So would they pay for the solution? Would they give up their time? Maybe, say, if you love it so much, would you be willing to spend half a day with us next Friday with our engineering team, testing out the solution? Or would you switch from your current solution? Because at the very beginning, you learned what solutions that they're using today. So is it valuable enough where they would switch out of what they're using today to study for the national exam and use this solution instead? And then if it's not quite the solution, or like you want to find out, well, what will it take for them to use this solution, if at all? And the way I like to ask the last question is the NPS question, Net Promoter Score question. So on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely would you be to use the solution and share with a friend or colleague? And if their answer isn't 10, then you ask them, well, what would it take? What would it take to get to a 10? So you want to learn, like, if they have any ideas too. So after the validation, right, so there will be one of three possible outcomes. Either the customers will love it and you'll have talked to 6 or 8 and they will completely validate that this is the right solution, and that's just then ready to hand off to engineering. More often than not, and this is the vast majority of the time, you'll find that the users will say, well, you're onto something, but either elements of the solution aren't quite valuable to me, or that there were some parts of the solution that was confusing. Well, now you know that you need to go back and you need to iterate on the prototype based on the feedback before it goes up to engineering. So you're iterating on the prototype and then you go back and do another round of user tests. And then on the, I don't know, I find it's like 10 or 15% of the time, it's not even a valuable solution to begin with. Like, you were totally off track. That's when you, unfortunately, it's not something that you can build, but you might have the competing solution that you'll go back and maybe you'll test instead. But again, even though it might be discouraging or disheartening to learn that this wasn't the right solution, you'll have saved weeks and months of engineering time not building something that would have gotten to market and nobody would have used. Okay, so the Geekie sprint outcomes. So Geekie went and talked to, in the first round, I think about 5 or 6 users. And they ended up having to go through 4 rounds of testing because the users said, interesting idea, but but there's some parts of it that was valuable and other parts that weren't really that important to me. And then some parts of the solution were confusing. So they iterated on the prototype actually 4 times, and they did 4 rounds of testing. And finally, at the very, very end of the 4th round of testing is when they heard the excitement in students' voices, where the students were like, oh my God, like, when can I get this? I know it's not ready, but please, like, give it to me early, and I promise I won't, like, let anybody else know that I have it. And then they decided that they were gonna go build it, and then they did do an A/B test around the old solution versus the new solution, and they found that the conversion improved by 50%. But even more so, what I loved was the Geekie team's feedback, which is, wow, this was some of the best days I ever had at Geekie, some of the best, most fun days. And then also, it's totally transformed how we do product development now. We no longer go the old way of, even though we thought we were agile, we really weren't agile because we weren't doing this as a group, we weren't coming up with lots of different ideas, and we weren't validating. So now, and if you talk to them, they actually, they run sprints every week. How are we doing on time, Brandon?
We're doing good. You got about 25 minutes. So
What's
we
that?
can, about 25 minutes. So if you want to do like 15
okay.
minutes and
So,
Q&A.
you guys want to do another group exercise? Okay, awesome. So the second group exercise is a prototyping and user testing exercise.
I think
Question.
there was a question there.
Oh yeah, what's the question? Yeah. Okay. The question is, how do you go about selecting the users? So a few things. So one is, you want to make sure that they're part of your target segment. So, there will probably be somebody who qualifies them ahead of time. They can be users who are already using the existing product, or users who have no experience with the product. That doesn't much matter as much as, are they part of the target segment? And then I tend to schedule 8 on a given day, because a couple people might drop out and you might then end up with 5 or 6. And 5 or 6 is enough to get general sort of directional feedback. More than that, you'll see a lot of diminishing returns. Less than that might not give you enough sort of sample data to know. Does that answer your question? Okay. Okay, any other questions before we move to the next group exercise? Question.
So, like, do you give them a list of tasks to complete, or just kind of freely go through the prototype themselves?
Yeah, the question is, do you give them a list of tasks to complete? So, so if I'm using like a usertesting.com software, that's sort of task-based, but when I do it live, I end up not giving them any tasks. Like, the 3 steps is, first spend 10 or 15 minutes making them feel comfortable, learning about their world, and just telling them that like they can't mess up, right? Like you really want to just understand, how they feel about the product, and you're never going to get upset with what they say. But then you're just going to hand on the prototype and say, hey, this is the solution that we designed around this problem that you articulated in the beginning. Can you just go through it and I'll ask you a bunch of questions at the end. And then you just observe them, right? It'll take like 5-10 minutes, depending on how involved it is and how much they struggle through it, for them to go through. And then during that time, right, you're taking notes too, and you might have an observer sort of taking notes of like, where did they get stuck? Where did they just and sometimes you sort of like get their reactions of like, oh my God, this is amazing, or whatever, or sometimes they're like, okay, I just don't get it. And you'll know, and you really want to observe them before you ask any questions. And then I reserve the last 20, 25 minutes to start asking them questions about what they walk through.
So it's okay to tell them what the how might we, the main question that you came up with?
Well, hopefully you've identified the target user, it's in their target segment. So you've identified in Geekie's example, like high school students who are about to study for the national exam or who are studying for the national exam. And then during the first 10 or 15 minutes, you just want to understand their struggles, their pain points, what solutions they're using. So you don't really have to share with them like, oh, this is what I designed for you. You don't want to lead them on, right? You just want to sort of understand that there's a problem that they have. Now, here's a solution that we designed for you. Now you tell me if this solution was valuable at all.
Thank you.
Yep.
So in your slide, you actually showed the prototype bit. If it's a software and you're giving it to them, are there a bunch of screens that have been just mocked up that they click their way through? Or
Yeah, they're generally clickable prototypes. If it's an app that you're simulating, they're clickable prototypes. So they just click through wherever there's a button. If they click on the button, it would advance to the next screen.
And it includes things like typing in their name or whatever. If they have to key in something, it'll account for that too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so prototypes will let you also sort of key in things. Now, it might not sort of send it to the server and do anything with it, but exactly. Another question.
What happens if something, the prototype includes something in hardware that you can't have completely done for this? So how do you handle that?
Oh, hardware. Okay, so that's good. That's a good segue into the next exercise. So yeah, this design sprint can be done with hardware products too. So, the previous example was prototyping with pixels and clickable mockups. Well, we can also prototype with things that we find in our arts and supplies class project, right? So this is an example of what you might want to do to sort of prototype our hardware solution. And we're going to go through that exercise right now. So you ready? All right. So here is the design challenge statement. This is why we have Play-Doh in front of us. So the challenge statement is, how might we design a tool to help a blind person grab a pin from a bowl without hurting themselves? So the target user is a blind person, and the need is that they need to grab this pin that's sharp from a bowl without hurting themselves. Okay, so you're gonna have 5 minutes. You're gonna take a piece, the Play-Doh that's in front of you, and silently do this on your own, which is prototype the solution that you think will help this blind person. And then I'll bring everybody back together for the next step of the exercise. Okay, that's time. All right, that was time. Okay, so the next exercise is that you're going to now partner up. So find a partner at your table. So just 2 people, and then if there's an odd number, try to find another odd number table. But partner up. And the exercise is that one of you is going to close your eyes and pretend to be the blind person, and you're going to play with your partner's prototype. And the partner is going to try to refrain from explaining the prototype, okay? So you're not going to explain the prototype, and you're going to observe your partner playing around with the prototype, and then at the end you're going to also start asking some questions to your partner, like did you find it valuable? What worked about the solution? What didn't? What improvements would you make to it? So you have roughly about 2 minutes for that exercise, and then you switch, right? Does that make sense? So 2 minutes, one person's a blind person, the other person is observing, and then you switch, and then you switch, and then you test the other prototypes. All right, so did you find your partners? Everybody has partners? Partners, okay. So I'm going to tell you when to switch. There's a lot of talking right now. You're going to try to refrain from explaining your prototype. So the blind person is just playing with it and sort of, you're going to observe. And then at the end, you're going to ask them, to give you some feedback around it.
But I already told you.
As long as we probably can ask questions. You might refrain from answering it. Okay, if you haven't already, switch. So if you haven't already, time to switch now.
He's like, can you just, it is. They call you?
Okay, guys, so I'm going back to this slide. So just show of hands. So you're now evaluating your partner's prototype. So show of hands of how many people said successfully validated, like this is totally the perfect solution without any iterations or changes. Oh, wow. Well, this is a very easy problem. Just show of hands. How many people said totally a failed solution? Not workable at all. Right? Okay. Okay. And then how many said that it was close, but it needed a couple of iterations? You know, 1 or 2 iterations.
I wasn't sure which end.
Disaster, something like that. Yeah. Disaster. Okay. All right. So, yeah, probably kind of similar to kind of what we see when we go through real prototypes. Other questions. So, what percentage of you, or show of hands, like how many people found that it was really hard to refrain from explaining to your partner? Yeah, I mean, right? Like, yeah. And, yeah, when you really do your user task, like you will observe, I promise you, exactly what you observed here, which is somebody struggling through it and you feeling compelled to explain what your solution does, and that's the best way to not get the feedback that you're looking for. So you really do want to try not to explain anything, observe the struggle, save all of the discussion for the end. Okay, show of hands, how many people think that based on the feedback that you got from your partner, your next version of the prototype will be improved? Hopefully everybody. Okay, so it was just kind of a fun example that I thought I would do for you guys to sort of show prototyping and user testing in action in a very simple way. But you might want to also take like some of these exercises and do it with your team next time. Could be very fun too. Okay, so just a couple more slides and then I think we're wrapping up. So just, did that? Okay. So the design sprint benefits, I don't think I really need to go through them since we talked a lot about them in the beginning, and hopefully you sort of see now some of the benefits in action, which is you work cross-functionally as a team. It really encourages innovation. So remember back to the Crazy 8 exercise, we generated a ton of ideas in a very short period of time, and we were also able to converge onto some of the best ideas in a very short period of time. It's a very structured process and it builds momentum. Hard to sort of see it here, but you can sort of see that like when you go through the design sprint and you hear different people's ideas, those ideas will eventually start building on each other because you get moved from Crazy 8s to Solution Sketch to Storyboards. And so you might end up with your solution picking some of the other ideas that you saw, you discussed, and incorporating it into your idea. So it's really a process that builds momentum and sort of builds on other ideas. Minimizes waste because hopefully we're not having engineers build stuff that's not valuable. And it really is transformational to an organization's culture. As I said, I've done this design sprint process over a dozen times, probably like 19, 20 times, almost 2 dozen times now, and I have not had a bad sprint. And many of the teams have come back to me 3 months, 6 months later and said, hey, this has totally changed how we design and develop software. Okay, so I think that's my last slide. I'm really, I think Brendan, after this session, will send out a Net Promoter Score survey. So I'm a big believer of consuming science. Like, this can only get better with your feedback. So tell me what you liked. Tell me what you'd like to see improved about the workshop. And then Brendan will also send out my contact information, LinkedIn, email. So feel free to reach out to me anytime, especially if you want to run your own design sprints and you have a bunch of follow-up questions. Happy to answer them for you. I think hopefully maybe we have like time for like a couple questions.
Yeah, absolutely,
2 or 3
absolutely.
questions.
I'm sure I'll get a few more action items.
Okay. So let's answer 2 or 3 questions before we then hand it over to Brendan.
So one of the challenges that I would see is getting a good representative sample from the target users. So how do you plan about incentivizing them? Where do you find them? If you don't want to use third-party services like user testing, how do you go about
Yeah,
finding
so the question is, how do you go about recruiting your users? So one really way of recruiting users is who's using your product today. So you can, and the way I actually end up recruiting them is that I regularly send out Net Promoter Score surveys to my users, right? And so there's the Net Promoter Score survey of on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely would you be to recommend my product or service to a friend or a colleague? What do you like? What could go better? But then I also follow up with the question of, would you be open, to spending some time to talk to us about the product? And then I can pull from existing customers who have sort of already opted in to talking with us. There's other ways to recruit people who aren't using your products. So you could, and I've seen teams do this, like send a Craigslist sort of posting, but with a survey to pre-qualify them, so asking a bunch of questions and then pre-qualifying them. Other ways I've seen people do it is that, like, if you know where your target user sort of resides, like say it's a high school student, so you might go to a high school campus, you might go to the Starbucks there, and you might recruit them, there too. So there's lots of different ways depending on where you are. It's not that hard, but probably mid-sprint you'll want to have somebody who's working to recruit people for Friday. Do you need to incentivize them? I generally don't need to. People will often give you half an hour, but if you are having a hard time getting people in, $25 Amazon gift card or something like that should usually be sufficient. Okay, any other questions?
I think this would be for, one sprint, but what you were talking about doing this over a series of days, right?
Yeah. So Google, this process Google runs over the course of 5 days. Now, whenever I work with our portfolio companies, I don't have 5 days. So I often will do this sprint in a day or 2. It's a little bit of cheating in that I will get them through, and let me give you one. I will get them through the storyboard, and I'll have the teams prototype and do user testing when they're done. So going back. So here's the process again. Okay, yeah. So here's the process. So in one day, I actually can do all 3. So we just start really early in the morning at 8 a.m. and we might wrap up at 7 or 8 p.m. But I can do it in one day. 2 days is ideal. So I actually have never done that such and decide on 3 days. I actually have a condensed process. If you want, I'm also happy to send out a sample sort of, what do you call it, like a timeline or agenda. So from 9, 9:15 we do this. For 1 day sprint we do this. 9:15, 9:45 we do this. So I'm happy to send out my sort of sample 1 day agenda, 2 day agenda to get through this. And then what I'll tell the teams is, you guys make sure that you schedule an extra day to prototype and an extra day to do the user testing, and then report back to me. Because for the last 2, you don't need the whole sprint team. So normally the designer, if they've been involved in the process, can take the storyboard, turn it into a prototype, and then the user test really is conducted by one person and maybe an observer.
When I think of a sprint, I'm just thinking like a software development sprint, which is over multiple sprints. Is that the case here as well, multiple sprints?
multiple sprints. So yeah, so you could do multiple sprints. So going back to here, like I'll show you. So say it's a brand new product. It's not even out in the market yet, right? You might do something like this, or sort of mapping out the customer journey. During the sprint, you should sort of focus on one part of the journey to sprint on. And then maybe once you define that, like you could sort of say, then sprint on this, or sprint on this. So I do have teams that, sort of stitch together multiple sprints to come up with a bigger, fuller solution.
So this process really applies to design sprints, right? Not the software development sprints. That's where you're getting that, right? Yeah.
Oh, you mean development sprints are when it goes to engineering?
Oh no, I understand it's two different sprints.
Yeah.
I was just thinking like, maybe there's a reason why they both called sprints. Because like software sprint
Okay.
has like multiple sprints.
Yeah. So that's dual track agile, right? So there's the discovery sprint, which is what we're talking about here, and then there's the development sprint. And really, sprint is time boxed, right? It's sort of like there's a methodology that you follow, and there's a way to sort of measure and track outcomes at the end.
So I can see that this whole process applicable to like some small feature of the larger product, like which you can tackle within a week. But what if like when you're reimagining the whole large product?
Yeah.
So how will this process map into like a larger visualization? How will you do that?
So I have done sprints. Okay, so lots of questions in terms of what level of detail, like into sprints. So I've done sprints, by the way, like where it's like simple sprint, redesign a homepage. So like very, sort of piece of the solution. And I've done a sprint where it's like, okay, we're blue sky, we just raised a bunch of money, we need to figure out what product we're doing, and it's sort of it's higher level. What you end up finding though is that sometimes when you boil the ocean too large, you don't get through enough. But it might be sort of a good way to sort of at least paint the high level picture and then sort of sprint on some of the details. So my recommendation generally is don't try to boil the ocean if you already kind of directionally already have sort of the bigger picture. Focus on one part. If you don't have the big picture, this might be a good process to come up with a big picture. Okay. In the interest of time, I'm going to stay for as long as I need to for any additional questions. So feel free to come up to me. I'm going to let Brendan wrap up and then do the drawing. And I'm here, and then Brendan's going to send out the NPS survey and my contact information too.
Action item. Big round of applause, please, for Hug. That was a fantastic session. If nothing more, you got to play with it later.